Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Attewell. I'm CEO at the Search Laboratory, and welcome to today's online workshop on the subject of future-proofing attribution in B2B marketing. So we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. The workshop should last about 30 to 45 minutes. If you do have any questions as we go along, please do send them to the chat box just on the side of the screen there. We've got some time at the end where we can come back to you with some answers on these. Very briefly, for those who aren't familiar with Search Laboratory, we are an integrated global digital marketing agency of around 150 people, and that's split between offices here in the UK and also in the US. In practical terms, we drive profitable growth for our clients, that's through digital marketing and data science. We are driven by evidence, we're led by transparency. We search for the truth in data that ignites change and sparks growth for our clients. I won't dwell too much on this one. We have a range of services that we offer. Here's a quick visual representation across the main areas of performance marketing, growth strategy, data science, and also global expansion. We've done a lot of work over the years in B2B. It's always been one of our key markets. So we've had a long list of B2B clients. Sorry, the slides just skipped on there. A long list of B2B clients, probably similar to yourselves with similar challenges. We, I guess, understand the kind of challenges that you probably have around attribution, and chances are we've come up with some kind of solution to help solve these over the years. In terms of your team for today, so yep, I'm Chris. I introduced myself before. My role today really is just to introduce the session, and then I'm going to hand over to the expert for today, who is David. So David Howlett is Data Solutions Architect. He's worked at Search Labs for, I think, around 8 years, starting life in our paid media team. He then moved on to our digital strategy team, and in his current role as Data Solutions Architect, he uses the power of cloud-based solutions to extrapolate and model value from our clients' data. He's worked on a multitude of B2B clients over the years, helping them leverage the power of their data to generate better returns from the marketing investment. And now we'll hand you over to David.
Perfect, thanks, Chris. So today I'm going to be running through, first of all, identifying what the challenges are, so we're all on the same page. Then talk about how we can implement simple solutions, and then get to the more advanced stuff of centralisation of data and the ultimate solution, which is using predictive modelling. So when it comes to B2B attribution challenges, there's obviously quite a few of them, but I've got 4 main ones up on the screen. So the first one being multiple stakeholders. Something that we find quite often is that when it comes to a B2B decision, a purchase, there's often multiple people within a business that actually make that decision, and they quite often each have their own user journey with the seller. That might be that they actually all fill in their own forms, or they're all doing different research phases on the website, and that leads to a really fractured user journey. It's really important to consolidate those together into one unique person. Obviously, a massive part of B2B is lead generation. That's not to say that all B2B is lead based. Some of it is also transactional, and we will cover that throughout this. But typically what happens with lead generation is that we find that maybe there could be upwards of 20, 30 different ways to actually fill in a lead with a business if they've got various white papers, different form fills, contact us, phone calls, etc. And each one of these different types of lead generation will have a different value to your business, a different likelihood of success, and a different likely value at the end of it. That's a key problem with attributing value. And really that leads well actually into a disconnected research phase, where you might have someone who's maybe going to spend 2, 3, or even upwards of 12 months deliberating if they're going to purchase. And they're going to have various different touch points with yourselves over the phone, over your website. And what typically happens is you're stuck in this last click attribution model, which will inevitably put the value probably on direct or brand, or maybe even an offline connection like over the phone. And it's very hard to then market against that. And then lastly, we've got long purchase cycles. So I just mentioned there, obviously you can easily be up to 12 months in some cases, but sometimes it's important that we don't forget as well that a user journey doesn't end with a sale. If you're selling something that's consumable, that people are going to buy regularly, or they're going to have to renew after 12 months, etc., then that cycle is actually very long, and that's an attribution challenge in itself. If they're going to purchase every month, then we don't want to value a sale just on the first month, for example. So when it comes to actually solving these as well, essentially, once we've solved some of these problems or all of these problems, you're going to have a better understanding of the ROI of your marketing activity. You're going to be able to create a unified view of each customer and specifically that customer's value. And ultimately, the reason we're doing this is so that you can redefine your investment strategy and switch from a reactive to a proactive marketing strategy. So we like to start with finding the truth in data, and what that really means is breaking it down into 3 key components. So first of all, we recognize that each customer has a different value. And the best way to understand that is if you were to walk into a store, the person standing next to you likely has a different value to that business than you do. Maybe you're a new customer, whereas they're an existing one, or they've got a product in hand, or whatever products they're looking at might differ to what you're looking at. So we understand that a person's unique attributes, behaviors, and actions determine their value. And that value is really breaking down into 2 different aspects. So each sale has a different value today. That's considering things like product and service costs, shipping costs, returns rates, etc. Really drilling into what is the profit of that individual sale. Part of that might be a minimum contract of 12 months, for example. And then the sale also has value after that as well. So each sale has a different value tomorrow. And that's really getting into the nitty-gritty of, well, what's the expected lifetime value of this customer, and how does that differ based on their attributes, their behaviors, which product they purchased, etc. So these are 3 key aspects that we're going to be coming back to throughout this presentation. Now, how we solve these is we typically build what we call a data roadmap, and really this is essentially building a blueprint for your business to say, these are the steps we're going to take. We start off walking, jogging, and eventually sprinting. Obviously, we'd love to get to the best in class as quick as possible, but we recognize that there's transformations that business has to go through to implement some of these solutions, and that's why we start at the simple end and work our way up. So starting at the simple end, really, applying a simple solution to attribution. What we're going to talk about here is how we at least get away from that last click, 12-month later disjointed attribution of value, and how we at least bring it to the front of the user journey. So the way we do that is by analyzing CRM data. Some of you may already be doing this. You may already have teams dedicated to analyzing your CRM data, or maybe you haven't really looked at it before. And there's 3 key questions that you should be asking yourself. So the first one is, how are you surfacing the insights from your CRM if you're doing anything? And what I mean by this is, when someone analyzes your data, how does that transpire through your business? Does it make it to your marketing teams? Are you doing it in a PowerPoint, an email, or, as we'll go on to, are you visualizing your data in a way that enables all stakeholders to be part of that insight? The next one is, how are you actioning insights? It's really common when we talk to businesses that we find that they actually do have some insights around things like lifetime value and how that differs between different products. But there's sort of numbers that are floating about in the business, and they're not necessarily being injected into your marketing strategies. So you should ask yourself that question. And lastly, where does your data sit? We'll be coming back to this one throughout, but quite often we see that people are trying to extract insights from the data, but they've not got it in the right tools. They're not approaching it the right way, and that really limits what they can do, particularly if there are difficulties around that data, such as inaccuracies that are hard to account for if you're not using the right tools. So before we go into too much detail, I just wanted to put up an example user journey that we'll be coming back to later in this presentation. So the idea being that someone may come to your homepage. That's probably where most of them are initializing their engagement with you. They'll probably then go and look at certain products or services, and they may do this over a course of months. Obviously, there's many touch points. I can't fit them all on the screen. But inevitably, they'll probably do something like access a white paper, which is gated content, or fill in a form. Maybe you'll then remarket to them. They come back via email, eventually fill in another form, this one probably more sales focused. And in this case, they purchase over the phone. Obviously, I've sort of cherry picked to get multiple touch points in here of interest. But the key thing here is that as a business, you should be thinking, at what point can I identify this user? And essentially that's every time they give you some identifiable information. So a gated piece of content might have an email address against it, or a business name, obviously when they're filling in contact forms, when they're over the phone. And if you can list, well, these are all the times that I can identify this person, you can really bring that into what you're going to do next, which is analyzing your CRM data. So we know we've got these points of contact in this CRM. Now let's extract them and analyze them. So the first stage, as I mentioned, is extracting that data. It's quite common that we find that actually the tools of the CRM that you're using aren't always best suited to actually do this kind of analysis. They sort of give you really top-level stats. That's not necessarily what you're looking for. In our case, we often use BigQuery, but there's many other tools that you could be using to do this. Essentially, you want to take an extract of data many years if you can get it. 10 years is great. Obviously, if you've got less, then you've got less. And you want to break it down in your tool in a way that you can look at each individual person and the various components that make up their interaction with your business. So that might be things like, these are the 5 different inquiries that they made with us for the purchase, etc. These are the touch points they had. Once you've done that, you then want to value each customer. So if you had 10 years worth of data, you go through and you put a value against every single one of them over multiple horizons. So this was the value of the customer after 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, etc. And some of them won't have any value because they never went anywhere. But this is going to enable you to then say the value of this engagement is X, because on average this is the expected lifetime value of them. And how we do this is really critically, you then want to surface this data in a way that everyone can access, and that's via things like interactive dashboards, which I'll show you now. So on the right hand side here, we've got an example of a dashboard that's been created by us. It's actually one page of about 16, where each page is designed to extrapolate specific insights and enable certain segmentation of that data. I'd say the biggest thing that you shouldn't be doing is you shouldn't be surfacing insights in a PowerPoint, because they will only give you one view of the data, and that will really dictate what you can do with it. Instead, as a business, if you work on centralizing your CRM data in a way that you can surface it in a dashboard, such as, in this case, this is Looker Studio, you could be using Power BI, Tableau, etc. As long as you can surface the data in a way that enables everyone to engage, you can then share it throughout your business, and most critically with your marketing teams, so that they can then take your insights and actually inject them straight into their marketing strategies and make them actionable. Typical insights that you should be looking for to get out of your CRM analysis. So the first one, lifetime value adjusted KPIs. If you are currently optimizing towards either a sale or a CPA, maybe of say £200 for a CPA against a form fill, if you were to actually look at the lifetime values over multiple horizons, you might find that actually you could be spending £250, for example, against that, which is obviously a big change to your investment strategy in PPC, for example. You can also then start looking at things like returns rates and actually adjust your KPIs to make sure you're still profitable after expected returns rates. Buying behaviors is a really particularly interesting one, where what we want to be looking at is we want to first identify what product people typically purchase, and then also what they go on to purchase. So to give you an example here, we worked with a B2B furniture salesperson, a business, where we found that for every £1 of desks we were selling, we would actually sell 80p of other products. And obviously that's a massive change. That desk is not worth £100, it's actually worth £180 to the business. And that really changes how you start to market those products. And lastly here, we've got response type KPIs. If you've maybe got 10 different white papers, you should understand the value of each individual white paper, because they will all definitely have a different value, because they're targeting different types of customers with different types of content. So once you've done this analysis, you've got a load of insights now. The next key stage is actually to realign your KPIs to make sure you're injecting them into your marketing strategies. So the first thing in how we're going to solve our initial attribution issues is to segment your customers' lifetime values on their first actions. So you've valued every customer in your database. Now let's see how those values break down into these key segmentations. So first inquiry method. What is the value of a phone call when it's the first inquiry we have from them versus this particular white paper or form fill or a particular product purchase? Because obviously you might be transactionally focused. Then you also want to segment those values on inquiry date. A classic example is that quite often, if you do anything around Black Friday, we'll find that new sales in Black Friday are often less valuable than other times of month, so the lifetime values are actually less, and that should change how we invest during Black Friday, for example. If you're pulling through the touch point that they had with your form fill or with your transaction, then perfect. We can also start to segment those values down into various campaigns. So maybe form fills driven through a particular campaign are worth less typically than others. Once you've now got those key insights, you need to actually get them into the platforms. So GA4 is a great example where if you have 10 different response types, you could be putting a value against each individual response type there. And that switches you from a CPA target now to a blended revenue target, an expected revenue. This form is worth £300, that form is worth 200, for example. And that completely changes now how you're optimizing your business, because you're now starting to optimize towards the most valuable types of engagement. You can you realign your investment strategy appropriately to that. And of course, we're talking about GA4 here, but there's nothing stopping you putting those values into things like Meta as well and LinkedIn, for example. Now, the last one's probably a bit unexpected, but the key thing that comes out of this is that you've just spent a lot of time analyzing your data. It's a great opportunity now to review the data cleanliness and identify next steps. So you should be documenting inaccuracies and challenging assumptions that your business is currently making about your data that may or may not be true. And what we typically find here is that there will be certain inaccuracies within the data, but provided you can identify them, more often than not, you can implement solutions to solve them through data engineering. And critically, what we're doing here is we've done a first quick step that massively improves our current attribution system. We can now switch from a CPA to a revenue-focused target, even though it's lead gen. And what we're doing is we're building a value proposition for more advanced solutions. If we implement this and see an improvement in performance, it makes building a business case much easier for more complicated and expensive solutions down the line. Now, if you're transactional focused, you might be thinking, you've talked a lot about lead gen here, but there's another key aspect you should be doing, and that's tracking transaction profit. So what you want to be doing is you want to be collecting your product costs, your delivery costs, or building a rule set around delivery cost and centralize that into one place, such as BigQuery. That will then enable you to actually calculate the profit for every transaction that goes through your website, or every transaction going through GA4. You can then enrich GA4 with that profit, hourly in fact, so that you are now tracking profit against all your marketing activity. And the benefit of using GA4 here is that it will actually enact its data-driven attribution model against the profit that you're pushing through in there. So you've now solved some of your attribution issues, at least, by pushing profit in and attributing it from a DDA perspective. Now, just like with what we were running through before, it's really important you surface this data very clearly through building a dashboard that enables you to see profit against individual SKUs, against individual marketing campaigns, and obviously your costs against that. And that's a massive step forward for any business. We always see big changes when we switch to profit instead of revenue. And of course, making sure that your bidding algorithms are now optimizing towards it. A few quick insights that will come typically if you do this kind of work. So impacts of free delivery. When we look at individual profit against individual product SKUs, what inevitably falls out of it is that there are some products that are very hard to market when you give free delivery against them because their margins are too low. And it's insights like that that enable you to actually enrich your product buying strategy. We've had clients go back to their suppliers and actually get better rates off the back of being able to show that here's my marketing data, this is how much I can spend against your products, but I can't because it's not profitable to do so. If that fails, then you can move on to product pricing optimization, actually changing pricing of your products to better balance the discrepancies between them. And typically, this is all going to culminate in a product-driven marketing strategy. So this is an excellent thing that you should be doing if you're more transactional focused. So what we've done is we've looked quickly at how we extract value out of your existing data, your CRM, and how we push those values into places like GA4 to help reduce the attribution issues that we've currently got. The next stage is data centralization, so we can automate these processes. So we're now moving into that, building a singular view of your business. Now, there's a lot of challenges around data centralization, and one of the biggest ones being that there's often multiple stakeholders within the business that own different pots of data throughout. And it really requires you to set up one unified person that can bring them all together and say, this is what we're doing. Now, you want to also be careful of expensive black box solutions. There's obviously a lot of them out there. They've each got their own pros and cons. But what can typically happen when implementing a black box solution is that you sort of become beholden to it. You can lose data ownership in the sense of you may not just be able to extract your data anymore and do the analysis that we've just run through, something that would have been very valuable to your business, and you might have to go through other agencies to achieve that. There's also quite often limitations around knowledge. When it comes to implementing the best possible data centralization solution, there's a lot of expert knowledge requirement to make that decision. So these are some of the challenges that we're really going to help address. So the first steps that you should be doing is you should be writing down a list of what data do I have, what are my priorities. It's really tempting to try and build a solution that centralizes absolutely everything, because obviously that's the future, it's where you want to get to. But that can lead you to implementing quite expensive solutions and sort of spinning your wheels a bit, not progressing. So instead what you want to do is you want to identify what your priorities are. For example, saying, well, we need to be able to identify if we've got new customers on the website and things like that. Well, that's CRM data. And actually, perhaps just centralizing CRM and online is the way to go before you bring any logistics data into that, for example. And the way you do that is by identifying what your pain points are across the business. The biggest pain points we typically see are boardroom level KPIs such as profit, new customer acquisition, retention and lifetime value, and how they maybe are cross purposes with your marketing KPIs, which might just be a generic lead form or revenue. And solving that key discrepancy there can bring a lot of value to a business. So there's three key steps, I guess, to centralizing your data. The first one, the most important one, being focus on joining your online and offline user journeys together. It's the biggest benefit that you can get out of all this, and should probably be your main priority. There's multiple ways of doing this, but really the best way to do this is to take the client ID out of GA4, and every time you identify someone, so they filled in a form, for instance, or they made a purchase, you push that client ID through into your CRM and you store it against that person. That's going to enable you to now join up their entire user journey, wherever cookies have remained, across their online touchpoints and all of their offline touchpoints. There's a lot of businesses out there selling CRMs and CDPs that will suggest perhaps using their own web tracking here. But from our perspective at least, I think GA is sort of the leader in tracking online behaviors, and we would recommend going down the client ID route, really, or perhaps doing both if you prefer. Now, once you've done this, the thing you have to be aware of is that you actually, if you're on GA4, you have a BigQuery export sat in BigQuery of everything that's happening on your website. What this is doing is, if you take an individual person and their various events that they're firing on your website, behaviors they're exhibiting, it is tracking them row by row, every millisecond, what they are doing essentially, and it's storing it in BigQuery ready for you to use. It's an incredibly rich data source that is at your fingertips. And when you pass the client ID through into your CRM, you will now have a join between these two data sets. You can now join up all those rich behaviors online with the offline data that you have against that person. And now you want to determine a scalable approach to joining these together. It's really tempting to try and pull all that BigQuery data into your CRM, but actually it can be more efficient to go the other way and move your CRM into BigQuery and do your modeling there with all your online behavior stuff, and then all your online behaving data, and then push back the output into your CRM. So, for instance, calculating the expected lifetime value of a person, you can do that all within BigQuery, and then just push the output back into your CRM. That's a much more scalable approach than trying to move all the data about as whole sums, if that makes sense. So determine what your priorities are and solve them one at a time, rather than trying to build a massive solution that solves everything all up at once. Now, once you've done that, we want to make it actionable. We don't just want to move data about so we can get insights. They have to be actionable insights. So let's start enriching GA4. And what we really mean by this is saying, you've now just identified, you are identifying someone the moment they fill in a form, for instance, let's push everything, all the data we know against that person back into GA4. So first step should be building a measurement plan saying, as a business, when someone identifies themselves, when they fill in a form or when they log in or make a purchase, what information do we want our marketers to have at their fingertips about that person? A really good example is whether or not they're a new or existing customer. Obviously, if you're tracking that in GA4, your marketing teams can now say, we spent £50,000 this month and we drove, and 60% of our leads were from new customers, for example, and things like that. They can also now optimize directly to a cost per new customer instead of just existing. There's other things you could be pushing in, like if you've been modeling when this person's likely to purchase, which month, for example, you could build audiences off the back of that, or predicting their future products that they want to purchase, or pushing through products they've previously purchased, etc., those sorts of things. And the reason we're doing all this is for audience creation and analysis. So once that data is in GA4, your marketing teams can now create audiences off the back of your CRM data, essentially. Now, just like before, when it came to surfacing CRM insights, business intelligence is one of the best ways of surfacing insights out of your CRM data now from an automated perspective. So I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because obviously BI is a big topic in itself. But when it comes to visualizing your data, the most important thing you should really be thinking of first is surfacing your business growth KPIs. So you've built your measurement plan now and you've said profit, new customer acquisition, whatever it is the key thing we're using to drive our business growth. Make sure you are now surfacing that data against your marketing data. So I spent X, I drove this much profit, this many new customers from that campaign. Right? To service it, so centralize it all into one place and visualize it using BI. We often also see cases where there'll be multiple different sources of truth within a business. You might have 3 or 4 reports flying about your business where if you were to ask the same question of each one of those reports, you get a different answer. What you want to do is you want to create a single source of truth. This one visualization that you've got, this dashboard that you've created, is where all questions will be answered from. And if you've got a question that you can't answer with this BI, then you implement it, you iterate on what you've currently got. Segmentation is the secret to great insights. You don't want to just surface like reporting at I spent X this month, I drove this many clicks. The real value comes from segmenting that down. So I spent this much against this particular product, against this particular type of customer, etc. And then seeing, well, what's the ROI against that product, against that type of customer? Are we aligning our marketing correctly against that? And the most important thing is to remember that this is an iterative process. It's when it comes to visualizing data, it's very hard to explain what it is you want it to look like, but it's very easy to say what you don't like once you've seen it. This is a common thing we see. So you want to create a prototype, then all the key stakeholders need to review it and say, oh, actually, it'd be great if I could see this instead. And then you iterate on it and keep going, keep improving the visualization that your business is using to draw insights out of your data. So now I just want to talk about machine learning, which is the key solution that you want to get to at the end of all of this. And what we're really looking to do is we're looking to solve one of the biggest hurdles, which is attributing over a long user journey and putting value on individual touch points. Up until this point, we've put a load of value at the beginning of the user journey, you know, where people are identifying some of the researching phase, they're filling in forms. But if you're doing prospecting, you might not be driving those forms either, and you're not getting value there. So what we're looking to solve, these 3 key business challenges: attribution over a long user journey down to individual touch point values, getting away from arbitrary targets that don't account for lifetime values. So even if you have segmented out values for different form types, it's still arbitrary. We want to get to a point where we're saying this particular interaction with this particular person is worth X, and that's going to be different to someone else. And once we've done this, we'll actually be able to build much better top of funnel investment strategies, because we're now valuing individual touch points. And that means we're valuing the touch points that occur from things like prospecting. So what is estimated value modeling, and what's it got to do with machine learning? The best way to explain this is to give you an example. So if you were to walk into a car sales room, You might see 4 or 5 people walking about looking at various products, different cars. If you were to talk to the salesperson in there, as humans, we're actually very good at parsing all this data and saying, I think this person over here is the most likely person to purchase. I think that they're likely to purchase this product and spend this much money, you know, £60,000 on this particular trim. And that salesperson can tell you because they've had conversations with them about what their budget is. Maybe they've already had a test drive, or they've talked about trims, etc. So they're taking all this information about their behaviors, their attributes in, and coming up with a likely outcome. And that's what machine learning is doing, only we're doing it across thousands and millions of rows of data. So we're essentially building that car salesperson that says, because you're exhibiting these behaviors, these attributes, you've taken these actions, you are likely to be worth X. So if we go back to the user journey that we established before, and we go back to these 3 key touch points here, these are 3 key touch points where we definitely know we can value these people. They've given us their information, we've got attributes, we've got behaviors, and if we're lucky, we'll also get actually quite a few more touch points around it, because, you know, maybe they were looking at multiple products before they filled in that white paper. And that means that when we come to value that white paper, we can say, well, this is the product they're probably most interested in. That aligns to this white paper here, and therefore their value is likely to be X. And this is what it looks like. So if you were to build a model like this, you might find that when someone first comes to your homepage, we don't know anything about them. So what we're essentially saying is, if we were to get maybe 1,000 people who have just come to our homepage, we expect to get about £1,000 revenue out of that, £1,380. But as we get more information about this person, they start looking at particular products, we can start to really hone in what is their expected value. And what we're doing here is we're saying, well, for the last 10,000 people that came through and looked at these 3 particular products and had a user journey that looks like this person, on average they were worth £80 each, or £79.86p. And we continue going as we get more information about this person. The value is likely to change, and the value can go down. They could take certain actions on your website that actually typically correlate with someone who isn't going to purchase. But in this example, we're going through and we're iterating, and we come to a point where they've actually purchased, and we know what product they've purchased, we know what user journey they've had, and therefore we can say there's 10,000 people that look just like this person, and on average they're going to be worth £700 over the course of the next 2-3 years, or whatever horizon you want to use. This is essentially how these machine learning models work. We're predicting a future value based on all the known information we have about you at this particular time, which is exactly what a car salesperson would do as well. They can't say for certain you're going to purchase, but they can estimate your likelihood and the likely value if you were to. To give you an example of what this looks like in real time, so here is a model that we have built, and what you're seeing here is a cohort of every new opportunity that was driven for this business, right? So we've taken the cohort of everyone in September, and you can see that value there being pointed out on the left-hand side. Now, what we can do with these models is we can actually decay values down to 0. So if you fill in a form and we never hear from you again, we can decay your value all the way down to 0. And what we're building here is a predictive model that's saying, this is the value of my current pipeline of opportunities. Now, if I then put in the actualized revenue against these people, it starts to make sense. We've decayed people who didn't come back to 0, and then those who actually did go on to progress, and we've poured in their actualized values. So on the left-hand side here, you've got the cohort, which is entirely a blue bar. It's all estimated value. And then these exact same people come through 8 months later, and this is their actualized revenue against those same people. So what we're doing here is we're building a proactive model where we are estimating the value of every individual touch point they have, and you're now able to optimize to that today. You're able to bid against it. You're able to determine what should my investment be against prospecting, against an individual campaign, etc., on the basis that that value will come back 8 months later, which from a B2B perspective is a huge change in how you're optimizing your business. So I've run through that quite quickly. Just to summarize some next steps then for what you should be doing. So the first thing is identify your data pain points. Identify what problems do you have in your business that you think could be solved by data, even if you don't know how to solve it. Things like you're optimizing towards a generic lead form value, but actually you know the value of each person that fills in that form is different. How do we solve that? Once you've worked out your data pain points, build your data roadmap. Don't start at the end, which is best in class, which is the hardest things to do. Start at the beginning. What is the low-hanging fruit? What data do I have available now that I can action, and work your way up? And as you're doing that, you're going to need to scope solution requirements, and that's where you may need expert knowledge. Now, maybe that exists somewhere else in the business. Maybe you need to reach out to someone like ourselves to help you with that. But make sure that you are talking to experts so that you don't necessarily just end up buying a black box solution that tracks your data, essentially. You want to make sure that you always own it, that you always have access to your data. And that's all. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, David. I can see actually there's a couple come through in the chat box actually. So if you do have some time, there's one here around where to centralize data. So I think the question is lots of different options of potentially got a CRM, other pots of data. Where would you, what system would you use to centralize the data in, I guess?
Yeah, so there's a lot of options that you can take here. And the most important thing is that obviously the complexity of those options and what you get out of them is going to scale with cost. At the very end of the spectrum, you've got a CDP, which is essentially designed to ingest data from all across your business into one place and able to do all sorts of things with it. They're very expensive, and you might end up with a CDP in future, but you don't necessarily need to start there. So what we would typically suggest is that you pick a solution like BigQuery or Azure or some cloud-based platform and just pull your data into it, do a one-off extract into it, like your CRM data, and that enables you to use things like SQL to actually pull that data apart and analyze it. Bear in mind that if you're using GA4, I would highly recommend that you do, you've already got all of your website behaviors in BigQuery, which naturally makes it a really good first place for you to try centralizing your data in, because you'll naturally have all your online data there. You can pull through your CRM into there, and you've essentially done the first major step of centralizing online and offline in one platform there. And you can go on to more complex solutions from there.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense. Thank you. And then there's another question around how long the process will take. I think you're probably going to say how it's a piece of string, but there you go.
Yeah, it is obviously going to vary. And a key thing really is how fast can the business move. We've worked with businesses where we've gone through that full business transformation of CRM analysis all the way through to best-in-class machine learning models in 10 months. And that's really when the business is making the data available, they're going at the same speed as us. You can make that transformation really quickly. For instance, the CRM analysis you could have done within like 6-7 weeks, for example, quite easily. Even quicker probably if you're doing it internally yourself.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. And then I can see there's one final one. So I don't trust that my data is accurate. What can I do?
One of the biggest complaints we often see is that you've got some insights maybe out of your own data, but you really don't trust it because you know that there's times when rows get duplicated or maybe data fields don't get populated properly, and what ends up happening is that no one trusts the insight and therefore no one can use it. Now, this is why we recommend doing things like extracting your data out of the perhaps more limited tools that you've got with your CRM into things like cloud-based solutions like BigQuery, because you can solve a lot of issues with data engineering. For example, you've got rows that sometimes duplicate. Well, find the first row, always use that one, delete the other one, for example. Things like that are quite simple to implement when you're in the right tools to do so.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Well, I think we're coming up to 40 minutes now, and that's the last question, so that's pretty good timing. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, David, for your time as well in walking us through that. If you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to email us. You've got the email address there, or give us a call. We'd love to have some follow-up conversations with anybody about specific challenges you may have. And I'm sure we'll have come up with some kind of solutions in the past that we can share with you. So yeah, once again, thanks, David. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.